Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Feldy, and today we're going to continue on in our 3D printing journey. Today I'm excited to show you my new DIY 3D printed stamps. These are crazy fun because you can customize any shape and make it into a stamp product, which is great because you can make greeting cards, you can make signatures, you can make all sorts of things. Let's look at the process to see how you could do this yourself. To make our stamp, I'm going to be using two pieces of software. The first is going to be Adobe Illustrator, and if you don't have access to Adobe Illustrator, you could definitely use Inkscape, which is free. I'll also be using Tinkercad, which is an online modeling software. Everyone should be able to access that, but you can also do this in any modeling program you'd want to. So here we are in Illustrator, and I've dragged in an image, a JPEG of the Sparked Fun logo. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get the outline of it using tools that exist in Illustrator. So I'm going to go to Object, and I'll go to Image Trace, and then Make and Expand, and hit OK. And as you'll see, that's basically going to turn this picture I had into a clear shape. I'm going to take this direct selection tool, and I'm going to get rid of all the information outside of just the shape of the logo. So the first thing I'm going to do is delete the background. Sometimes there's more than one outline when you do the image trace, so let's just make sure that our shape is nice and clean. I'm going to take away the fill and add an outline so I can see that. And I'm going to zoom in. I'm just going to grab a piece of my outline and pull it away and see what happens. And it looks like there's nothing under there, so there's only one line, which is good. I'm just going to undo that. And now I have my shape. I can take this and bring it into my modeling environment. So to do that, I'm just going to save it as a SVG file, which is down here, and I'll call it Spark Fun Flame, and I'll save it to my desktop. Now we're going to bring that into Tinkercad, so you're going to go to your web browser. I use Chrome, and here I am in my environment, and I'm just going to go to Import over here to get that SVG inside my environment, and it'll be right here in my desktop, sfflame.svg, and I hit open and import. So here's our shape in our 3D printing workspace, and one thing we're going to want to do is actually flip this over because it's a stamp and we need to have the mirror of our object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for those arrows that control that alignment, and I'm just going to drag it around until it's flipped. So now we have our shape. I need to make it a little taller so that it can access the ink without the ink getting on the base of it. So I'm just gonna take this square right here, and I'm gonna change this to maybe 80. So if you look at this now, 80 is really tall, but the shape of the flame is the size of the bed. We're gonna bring this down in a minute. But the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make that kind of base that will stick to the handle. And I'm just gonna do that by dragging a box into my workspace, which is right here. And I'm gonna expand it until it's bigger than my flame by just a little bit and get it nice and snug around there. I don't want it to be too big, but I definitely want it to be a little bit bigger. So now if I kinda spin this around, you're gonna see that we have that shape of the base of the stamp. I feel like this might be a little taller than it needs to be, so I'm just gonna bring it down a bit to like there. That looks like the right proportions. And to make this one solid shape is pretty simple. I'm just gonna select all and hit this group command, and now it's one shape. And this is the shape I'm using for the base of my stamp. I'm gonna shrink it down quite a bit, and then I can just export this as an STL and put it on my desktop. So the next thing we need to do is make the handle, and we need that base of the handle to be the same shape of the base of the stamp. So instead of starting over, I'm actually just gonna edit this same file. I brought in this box that's a hole, and basically what that means is when I group this together, wherever that box is that's in the hole shading is going to cut out from what exists there. So first thing we wanna do is kind of get it so that it's not cutting into our whole object, but just the top part, the flame part. So I can do that by grabbing this and just dragging it up there. And then we'll see that it's lying flat against our bottom rectangle, but covering the Spark Fun logo, and that's kind of what we want there. So I'm just gonna hit Command A and then hit group them together, and there goes my flame. And you'll notice I have this nice clean rectangle, which is exactly what I was looking for. I just need to add something to hold on to when I'm using my stamp, so I'm gonna grab a cylinder and drag it onto here. And it's a little thick for what I'm looking for. I'm just gonna rotate it around to 90 degrees. And I'm also going to make it much thinner than it is right now. So I'm just gonna drag this back like that, yeah. And I want this to be like 2 or 3 millimeters thick. I'm gonna go with 4, that sounds good. And then I can drag this right onto my base. And I'm gonna make it as wide as the rectangle so that it has a nice feel to it. And I'm just gonna make sure that it's kind of in the center. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered, but it's still good to have it centered. And then I'll select all again, group this, and export it as an STL. Generally, with 3D printing, we're using materials like PLA or ABS, which are hard plastics. But when you're making a stamp, you need the bottom to be a nice, soft, rubbery plastic. So in order to do that, we're gonna use a special material called Ninja Flex, which is really rubbery and soft and perfect for stamps. And then we're gonna use our normal ABS or PLA for the handle on top because we need that to be hard. We're also gonna need to use a special extruder called the Flexi Extruder by Lulzbot for our Lulzbot printers. And this extruder is designed to work with this soft Ninja Flex filament. There are a few considerations and steps that you need to take in order to use your Flexi Extruder, but don't worry, Lulzbot has a very easy step-by-step guide to help you set it up. Kira will take your STL files and generate the G-code for your printer. This is great with a Lulzbot printer, but if you're using a different kind of printer, you might be using a different kind of software. So the first one I'm gonna bring in is the base of my stamp, and I can just drag it into my workspace like that, and you can see it's right there. I'm not gonna resize it because I sized it inside of Tinkercad, and right now I need to do a few things. I need to make sure that I have the right material chosen, which is the Ninja Flex, and I also need to make sure that I have the right printer with the right tool head. So I have my Lulzbot TAS6 with the Flexi Extruder, because this is what I'm using that soft filament for. Once I have all of those saved correctly, I can save this to a file and it'll save as a G-code file. So I'll say SF stamp base. I can save this to my SD card and now bring it down to my printer and start printing. I'll also need to print my handle, but the handle will be printed in PLA or ABS. I happen to use a different printer that we had at SparkFun, but if you're using one printer, you're gonna have to revert your tool head back to the regular one. But again, we just need to make sure we have the right printer and settings selected. So I'll go in here and I was using a TAS5 with a normal extruder, which is great. And the material I was using was ABS IC3D. And from here, I can just pull in the top of my stamp, its size, we don't need to change anything. And again, I could just save to file, and this will save my G-code wherever I want to an SD card that I can pop into the printer and start printing. When your print is completed, you should have these two pieces. One thing we need to consider when we're making our 3D printed stamps is that every single 3D print has the texture of a 3D print. So it has these thin lines. And when we go put our stamp into ink and then onto paper, that shape will see the lines of that texture in it. So we have to smooth out the shape before we can start using it on paper. Luckily, I came up with a really easy technique that everyone can do at home to make that texture nice and smooth for your stamps. These are the super high-tech tools I use to smooth out the shape on my stamp. So basically what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lightly put my parchment paper on top of my hot iron, just being careful not to get my fingers anywhere near there because that could definitely burn. And then I'll take my print stamp and I'm gonna take the base shape and just kind of put it on there and rub it around. And that's gonna get rid of that very fine texture and make it a smooth surface for your ink. Now we need to attach the base of the stamp to the handle. The handle is gonna help us hold on to the stamp when we're using it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take some Elmer's spray glue and I'm just gonna spray the bottom of this handle. And then I can take my stamp and just lightly place it right there. And now I have a usable stamp. Let's see how it looks. That's it, everybody. That's how you make a 3D printed stamp. I hope you guys had fun with this project. I certainly did. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Today we are continuing on. Hello. Hey everyone. Hey, what up, internet users? Nope. Look at how we do it. Nope. Ooh, I stamped the table. Ah, so close.
Thank you.
I got it. Okay.